On a freezing winter night, a billionaire encounters a hungry 9-year-old girl secretly hiding leftover bread in her coat. He follows her down a dark alley only to find her feeding her younger brother in an abandoned house. What began as a simple bread theft turns into a legal battle, a shattered past, and a family neither knows they need. Winter came early to Port Haven. Snow clung to the edges of the highway, like a warning quiet cold unavoidable. The sky had already gone dark when Alexander Crow eased his black sedan onto the gravel shoulder beside a roadside diner. The neon sign flickered weakly open. It hummed against the silence of the frozen evening. Alexander sat still for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. At 38, he was known as a technology billionaire, a man whose name appeared on magazine covers beside words like visionary and untouchable. Yet on nights like this, success felt distant, almost hollow. The wind cut through his tailored coat as he stepped inside. Warm air rushed over him, carrying the scent of fried food and burnt coffee. The diner was half empty. A truck driver hunched over a bowl of soup. An elderly couple shared a single plate. Everything felt worn, familiar, forgotten by time. Then Alexander saw her. A small girl, 9 years old at most, stood near an empty table by the window. Her jacket was too thin for winter sleeves frayed at the cuffs. Dark hair fell messily around her face as she wiped crumbs from the tabletop with careful, practiced movements. Her name, he would later learn, was Nayla. She wasn't eating. She wasn't speaking. She was watching. Alexander took a seat where he could see her clearly. He told himself it was nothing, just another child helping around a diner. But something in the way she scanned the room, alert and tense, made his chest tighten. Outside, snow began to fall harder. Inside, Nayla glanced toward the counter, then toward the door, calculating, waiting. Alexander didn't know it yet, but this ordinary winter stop, this unplanned pause, was about to fracture the careful order of his life forever. A plate sat abandoned on the table near the corner booth. Half a loaf of bread remained untouched, cooling beneath the diner's yellow light. Nayla noticed it instantly. Her eyes flicked toward the counter. The waitress was busy. The truck driver had his back turned. No one was watching, or so she hoped. She moved quickly. With a motion so smooth it felt rehearsed, Nayla reached for the bread and folded it inward, pressing it against her chest. Her small hands disappeared beneath her jacket as she slid the half loaf inside, flattening it against her ribs to hide the shape. She exhaled barely. This wasn't theft to her. It was survival. Across the room, Alexander froze. He had seen business deals collapse in seconds. He had watched numbers evaporate on glowing screens. But nothing prepared him for the quiet precision of that moment, the way a child stole food, not with greed, but with fear. Nayla adjusted her jacket, forcing herself to look normal. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure someone could hear it. Then she turned and walked hurried toward the back door. Alexander stood. He didn't shout. He didn't call after her. Something deeper held him still watching as Nayla pushed through the door and vanished into the winter night. Cold air rushed in behind her. The waitress glanced up too late. The door swung shut. The moment passed. Alexander's pulse did not. He paid his bill without touching the food he'd ordered. His hands trembled slightly as he buttoned his coat. Outside, snow fell heavier now, swallowing the girl's footprints almost instantly. He hesitated. Then he followed. The alley behind the diner twisted like a scar through the neighborhood. Snow melted into slush beneath Alexander's polished shoes as he stepped inside, the warmth of the diner replaced by biting wind and damp stone. The path narrowed quickly, walls closing and trash bins lining the sides like silent witnesses. A head movement. Nayla ran. Her breath came out in sharp white bursts as she darted around a corner, clutching her jacket tightly with one hand. She didn't look back. Looking back wasted time. Time meant hunger. Time meant danger. Alexander slowed his pace. He wasn't chasing her, not like that. He followed at a distance, careful not to let his footsteps echo too loudly. Each turn pulled him deeper into a part of the city money never touched. The alley curved again and ended. A boarded-up house stood at the far end, windows cracked, paint peeling. One weak light glowed inside, flickering like a fragile heartbeat. Nyla slipped through the broken door. Alexander stopped. From inside, something unexpected floated into the night. A voice, soft, gentle, almost shy. A song. Alexander held his breath as the melody drifted through the cold air, uneven but sincere, sung by a child who didn't know lullabies were meant for safe homes. He stepped closer just enough to see. Inside, Nyla knelt on the floor, breaking the bread into small pieces. In front of her sat a 3-year-old boy wrapped in a thin blanket, eyes wide with trust. His name was Aiden. Nyla fed him first. Only after Aiden smiled, only after he ate, did she take a bite herself. Alexander felt something inside him crack. And in that frozen alley beneath falling snow, he realized this story was no longer about curiosity. It was about responsibility. Alexander did not step inside. Not yet. He stood just beyond the broken doorway, the cold gnawing at his bones as the light from the abandoned house spilled across the snow. Inside, the air looked warmer than it truly was, thin, fragile warmth held together by breath and movement. Nyla sat cross-legged on the floor. The room was nearly empty. No furniture, no heater. Just a cracked mattress pushed against the wall, a cardboard box turned into a makeshift table, and a single lamp plugged into an extension cord that hummed softly as if it might give up at any moment. Aiden leaned against his sister, chewing carefully, seriously, as if each bite mattered more than the last. Crumbs dotted his blanket. His fingers were pink from the cold. Nyla brushed them gently. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "Slow, Aiden. It'll last longer." She broke the bread into smaller pieces, counting them without realizing it. 6 for him, 2 for her. Always that way. Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. This was not chaos. This was routine. Children weren't supposed to learn routines like this. Aiden's eyelids drooped as Nyla began humming again, the same soft tune Alexander had heard outside. It wasn't a real lullaby, not one written down anywhere. It was something she had made up, something meant only for moments like this. Nyla glanced toward the door. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Alexander didn't move. He slowly raised his hands, palms open, a universal sign of peace. His voice when he spoke was low and careful. "I'm not here to hurt you." Nyla's body stiffened instantly. She shifted closer to Aiden, one arm wrapping protectively around him. Her eyes, sharp and dark, far too old, studied Alexander's coat, his shoes, his posture. "Did I take your food?" she asked quietly. The question landed harder than any accusation. Alexander shook his head. No, silence stretched between them, thick and uncertain. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, a 9-year-old girl decided whether or not to trust a stranger. Alexander crouched, slowly lowering himself to Nyla's eye level. He made sure to keep his distance. "I saw you at the diner," he said. "That's all." Nyla didn't answer right away. Her fingers tightened in Aiden's blanket, anchoring herself. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She had already learned those things didn't work. "Are you going to call someone?" she asked. "Who?" Alexander replied gently. Nyla hesitated. "The police? Or people?" Alexander swallowed. "No." Another pause. Aiden shifted, pressing his face into Nyla's side. She instinctively stroked his hair, her thumb moving in slow circles, soothing him without breaking eye contact with Alexander. "He gets scared when it's loud," she said, as if explaining something important. "So I sing." Alexander nodded. "You're good at it." That surprised her. Nyla looked down, then back up. He hasn't been sick since yesterday, she added. That's good. Yesterday, Alexander repeated. She nodded once. Sometimes he doesn't eat enough. The words were simple. The meaning was devastating. Alexander glanced around the room again, the bare walls, the cracked floor, the thin blanket that barely counted as warmth. His voice dropped lower. Where's your mom, Nyla? Her jaw tightened. She died, Nyla said. No drama, no tears, just fact. 2 months ago. Alexander felt the air leave his lungs. And your dad, he's still alive. She hesitated, then added, he just doesn't come anymore. She didn't say why. She didn't have to. Nyla shifted, making sure Aiden was asleep before continuing. There was another woman, she said. After Mom. Alexander understood. She said we were too much. Nyla's voice wavered just slightly, so we left. You were told to leave, he asked carefully. Nyla nodded. I packed his sweater. She glanced at Aiden. It's his favorite. A silence fell heavy, suffocating. Alexander had negotiated billion-dollar deals. He had stood in rooms full of power and influence, but nothing had prepared him for the calm courage of a child explaining her own abandonment. Outside, snow pressed against the windows. Inside, Alexander made a decision he could no longer postpone. Alexander removed his coat. The cold bit instantly through his shirt, but he didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he draped the coat over Aiden's small body, tucking it around him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nyla watched every movement. That's expensive, she said softly. Alexander almost smiled. Almost? It's just warm. Aiden stirred, then relaxed his breathing, evening out beneath the unfamiliar weight. Nyla's shoulders dropped, a fraction relief slipping through the cracks of her careful control. Alexander straightened. I brought food, he said. More than bread. He set the bag down, backing away to give her space. Nyla approached it cautiously, as if it might disappear. Inside were sandwiches, soup sealed tight, fruit bottled water, enough for more than one night. Her eyes filled, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let the tears fall. Thank you, she whispered. Alexander nodded. I won't stay long. That seemed to matter to her. Trust earned in inches. I'll come back tomorrow, he said. The words surprised even him. If that's okay. Nyla studied him again, the same careful scan as before. Then she nodded once. Tomorrow's colder, she said. I know. She hesitated, then asked the question she had been holding back. You won't tell them where we are. Alexander met her gaze. I won't. Nyla exhaled for what felt like the first time all night. As Alexander stepped back into the snow, the wind cutting sharper than before, he realized something unsettling. This wasn't charity. This wasn't curiosity. This was the beginning of a responsibility he could never walk away from. And behind him, in a house without heat, a little girl sang softly into the winter night, believing just a little that tomorrow might be different. Alexander did not sleep well that night. The image of Nyla kneeling on the cold floor replayed every time he closed his eyes, the way her shoulders curved protectively around Aiden, the way she had spoken like a caretaker twice her age. Morning came gray and heavy. Instead of returning to his glass office tower, Alexander drove back toward the diner. He parked across the street, this time far enough away not to be seen. Snowbanks lined the curb, stained with salt and time. Nyla arrived just before noon. She walked quickly, her jacket pulled tight, Aiden's small backpack slung over one shoulder. She glanced behind her twice before entering the diner, as if expecting someone to stop her. Alexander watched through the window. She didn't sit. She didn't order. She waited. When a table emptied, she moved in silently, clearing plates, wiping surfaces. Sometimes the waitress noticed and nodded. Sometimes she didn't. At one point, a customer left half a sandwich behind. Nyla hesitated. Alexander's breath caught. She didn't take it. Instead, she wrapped it carefully in a napkin, and placed it inside her bag, neater, slower than the night before. Not desperation. Planning. When she left, Alexander waited 5 minutes before following at a distance. The abandoned house looked smaller in daylight, more fragile. The boarded windows sagged and the roofline dipped in places. This wasn't shelter. It was survival's last option. Alexander did not approach. He stayed across the street watching until dusk swallowed the alley again. He told himself this was observation, not involvement. But when night fell and he saw Nyla light the same weak lamp, he realized he had crossed a line he could not uncross. This was no longer a moment. It was a pattern, and patterns demanded action. On the second evening, Alexander returned with intention. This time he didn't come empty-handed. He carried insulated bags filled with hot meals, thermal blankets, children's vitamins, thick socks, and gloves small enough to fit Aiden's hands. He had stopped by a pharmacy without thinking twice, his credit card moving faster than his conscience. The alley felt colder than before. Nyla opened the door when she saw him, not out of trust, but recognition. She didn't smile. She didn't relax. "You said tomorrow," she said. Alexander nodded. "I keep my word." Inside, Aiden sat on the mattress, pushing a toy car back and forth along a crack in the floor. He looked up, eyes bright. "The man came back," he whispered to Nyla. Alexander felt his throat tighten. Nyla knelt to Aiden's level. "Eat first," she told him gently. She always said, "Eat first." Alexander set the bags down and stepped back. Steam rose as containers were opened. The smell of warm food filled the room, thick, comforting, unfamiliar. Aiden clapped once, then stopped, glancing at Nyla for permission. She nodded. Alexander watched as she served Aiden carefully, waiting until he had taken his first bite before lifting her own spoon. She didn't rush. She didn't hoard. She controlled the moment. "You don't have to watch us," she said quietly. "I'm not," Alexander replied. "I'm just here." She studied him. Why? The question hung in the air. Alexander considered lying. He didn't. Because someone should be. Nyla absorbed that slowly, like a new language. She didn't argue. When Aiden finished eating, Alexander noticed something else. His cough was gone. His hands were warmer. He looked lighter. That frightened Alexander more than anything, because it meant how close they had been to losing him. That night, Alexander returned home to a house that felt too large. The silence pressed in from every direction. He didn't pour a drink. He didn't turn on the television. Instead, he sat at his desk and opened his laptop. Search results flooded the screen. Child abandonment, emergency guardianship, temporary custody laws in Oregon. This was no longer emotional. It was legal. The next morning, Alexander met with his private legal counsel. He didn't give names at first, only circumstances. A 9-year-old, a 3-year-old, mother deceased, father absent, step-parent refusal. The lawyer's expression darkened. "That's abandonment," she said flatly. "Clear-cut." "What happens to the children?" Alexander asked. "If reported?" She exhaled. "Foster care, temporary placement, possibly separation." Alexander's jaw tightened. He drove back to the alley afterward, anger simmering beneath his calm. Not explosive anger, focused anger. The kind that sharpened decisions. Nyla was outside washing her hands with bottled water. She froze when she saw him. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. Alexander crouched again. No. She studied his face. "You look different." "I am," he admitted. He told her the truth carefully, in pieces she could understand. About laws, about safety, about what could happen if someone else found them first. Nyla listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked down at Aiden, who was stacking stones into a crooked tower. "They won't take him away from me?" she asked quietly. Alexander didn't answer immediately. "I won't let that happen," he said at last. It wasn't a promise made lightly. It was a line drawn, and once crossed, there would be no turning back. The snow fell harder that night. It wasn't gentle anymore. It came down thick and relentless, swallowing the alley in white silence. Alexander stood beside his car engine running, watching Nayla lock the broken door of the abandoned house with a piece of wire that barely held. She did it carefully, like it mattered. Aiden clutched her hand, his other arm wrapped in Alexander's coat. His steps were small, uneven, but he didn't complain. He never did. "You don't have to come," Nayla said quietly, not turning around. Alexander understood what she meant. "You don't have to change everything because of us, I know," he replied. "But I'm going to." She hesitated, then nodded once. The car door opened, releasing a wave of warmth that made Aiden gasp softly. He climbed in with Alexander's help eyes wide as if he'd stepped into another world. Nayla lingered, one foot still in the snow. "What if we can't stay?" she asked. Alexander met her gaze. "Then we'll find somewhere you can." That wasn't a guarantee. It was something better, honesty. She climbed in. As the car pulled away, Nayla twisted around to look through the rear window. The abandoned house faded quickly, shrinking into nothing beneath the snow. Alexander watched her reflection in the glass. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and leaned back, exhaustion finally winning. For the first time in weeks, they were not cold. The guest house sat behind Alexander's main residence, small but warm lights already on. Nayla noticed everything the moment she stepped inside. Clean floors, a couch with real cushions, a bathroom with towels stacked neatly, a heater humming steadily, filling the space with gentle warmth. Aiden laughed when the heat touched his face. Alexander knelt to unfasten his shoes. "This is temporary," he said, careful with the word. "Just for now." Nayla nodded, but her eyes never stopped moving. "Where do we sleep?" she asked. Alexander gestured toward the bedroom. 2 small beds waited inside, freshly made. Nothing extravagant, just safe. Aiden climbed onto one, immediately bouncing once before settling down with a grin. Nayla stood still, hands clenched at her sides. "It's okay," Alexander said softly. "They're yours tonight." That did it. Nyla's shoulders sagged, not into tears, but relief so heavy it almost dropped her to the floor. Alexander brought out food, warm soup, again fresh bread. Nayla served Aiden first, as always, but this time Alexander noticed something different. She ate without rushing. After dinner, Aiden fell asleep almost instantly, curled beneath thick blankets. Nayla tucked him in, smoothing his hair, humming the same soft tune from the alley. Alexander watched from the doorway. "You can sleep too," he said. Nayla shook her head. "I'll stay awake." Alexander didn't argue. He placed a chair nearby and sat with her instead. Outside, the snowstorm raged. Inside, something fragile and new began to take shape. The next morning, Alexander made the call. He stepped outside, breath visible in the cold air, phone pressed to his ear. His lawyer answered immediately. "I need emergency guardianship," Alexander said. "Today." There was a pause. Then, "Is the situation urgent?" Alexander looked back through the window. Nayla sat at the table, helping Aiden stack cereal pieces into careful lines. She smiled when he got it wrong, never raising her voice. "Yes," Alexander said. "It is." Paperwork moved faster than Alexander expected. Statements, documentation, a recorded account of the mother's death, evidence of abandonment. Everything aligned with painful clarity. By afternoon, a temporary order was in motion. When Alexander explained it to Nayla, he chose his words carefully. "This means you're safe here," he said. "No one can take you away without questions being asked first." Nayla listened closely. "And Aiden?" she asked. "He stays with you." Her breath hitched just once. "Thank you," she whispered. Alexander realized then that she wasn't thanking him for food or warmth. She was thanking him for stability. That night, as Alexander turned off the lights, he heard Nayla's voice drift down the hallway. She was singing again. But this time the song didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like hope. The call came late in the afternoon. Alexander was reviewing documents at the kitchen island when his phone vibrated, an unfamiliar number. He answered anyway. "This is Richard Hale," the voice said, strained and defensive. "I've been told you have my children." Alexander closed his eyes for a brief moment. "Yes," he replied calmly. "They're safe." Silence crackled on the line. "They don't belong to you," Richard said at last. Alexander looked through the window toward the guest house. Nyla was helping Aiden zip his jacket, crouched to his level, patient and careful. "They belong with someone who protects them," Alexander said. "Right now, that's me." Richard's breath caught. "I never meant for this to happen." Alexander didn't raise his voice. Intent doesn't erase impact. The conversation ended without resolution. That evening, Alexander sat with Nyla at the dining table. He didn't hide the truth from her, he filtered it. "Your father knows where you are," he said. "There may be meetings, questions." Nyla nodded slowly. "Is he angry? He's confused?" Alexander said. "And afraid." She considered that. He was like that after Mom died. Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened around her mug. "And the other woman?" she asked. Alexander chose his words carefully. "She doesn't want responsibility." Nyla exhaled through her nose. Neither did he. That night, long after Aiden fell asleep, Nyla sat awake by the window. Alexander joined her, not speaking. Some reunions were louder than others. This one began in silence. The meeting took place in a neutral office, plain walls, soft lighting, no symbols of power. Alexander arrived early. Richard Hale came 10 minutes late, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He looked older than his age. Not cruel, just diminished. They sat across from each other, a mediator between them. Richard spoke first. "I didn't know what to do." Alexander listened. "My wife died," Richard continued. "Everything fell apart. Marla said the kids were too much. I thought it would just be for a while." "For 2 months?" Alexander asked quietly. Richard's face flushed. "I was trying to get back on my feet." "And they were living in an abandoned house," Alexander replied. The mediator cleared her throat, shifting the conversation back to legal ground. Emergency guardianship, evidence, witness statements. When Alexander described Nyla caring for Aiden in the cold, Richard's eyes filled with tears. He covered his face with his hands. "I didn't know," he whispered. Alexander leaned forward. "You didn't look." That landed. Outside snow pressed against the windows. When the meeting ended, no agreement had been reached, but something else had. Truth. That night, Alexander sat with Nyla again. Aiden slept nearby, curled around a stuffed bear Alexander had bought earlier that day. His breathing was deep, even. "They talked about you today," Nyla said without looking up. "Yes," Alexander replied. "They did." She traced a line on the table with her finger. "Will we have to go back?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But I will fight for you." Nyla nodded. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "If we stay, will Aiden still be with me?" Alexander felt his chest tighten. "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "Always." Her shoulders relaxed fully this time. She leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to be a child for just a moment. "I don't need a big room," she said quietly. "Or toys. I just want him safe." Alexander met her gaze. "You deserve safety, too." She thought about that. Outside, winter deepened its grip on the city. Inside, a definition of home was being rewritten slowly, carefully, by people who had lost it once and refused to lose it again. The courthouse did not look intimidating from the outside. It was gray, almost ordinary, blending into the winter morning. like any other government building. But the moment Alexander stepped inside, the air changed. The warmth of the heater could not erase the weight of what this place decided for people who had no power. Nyla held Aiden's hand tightly. She had dressed him carefully that morning, smoothing the collar of his sweater, whispering reminders to stay close. Aiden didn't understand where they were, only that this place made his sister quieter than usual. Alexander walked beside them, not ahead, not behind, equal pace. The courtroom was smaller than expected. Wood-paneled walls, a raised bench, flags standing still in the corner. No drama, no spectacle, just consequences. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Nyla watched closely, her feet barely touching the floor as she sat. She didn't swing them. She didn't fidget. She had learned long ago that stillness attracted less attention. Alexander noticed. The case was called. The facts were presented clearly and without emotion. Mother deceased 2 months prior. Children left without supervision. Father absent. Living conditions unsafe, no embellishment. No accusation. Just truth. Richard Hale sat on the opposite side of the room, shoulders slumped. Marla, the stepmother, was not present. Her absence spoke louder than any statement. When Richard was asked to speak, his voice trembled. "I failed them," he said. "I didn't know how to grieve and be a parent at the same time." The judge listened. Then Alexander was asked to stand. He spoke calmly. He did not mention wealth. He did not promise luxury. He spoke only of what he had seen. A child feeding another child before herself. A lullaby sung to keep fear quiet. A winter night survived without heat. When he finished, the room was silent. Then came the question no one could avoid. Would the children like to speak? Alexander turned to Nyla gently. "Only if you want to." Nyla stood. Her hands shook at first, then steadied as she felt Aiden's fingers tighten around hers. "My name is Nyla," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "I'm 9, she swallowed. "I know my dad is sad," she continued. "But when Mom died, I had to be strong for Aiden. I still do." The judge leaned forward. "Where do you feel safe, Nyla?" She didn't look at her father. She looked at Alexander. "Where my brother sleeps warm," she said. The courtroom exhaled as one. The courthouse was quieter than Alexander expected. No shouting, no drama. Just the low murmur of voices and the steady echo of footsteps against polished floors. Outside, winter light filtered through tall windows, pale and cold, as if even the sun was holding its breath. Nyla sat beside Alexander on the wooden bench. Her feet didn't touch the ground. She wore a borrowed coat that fit just a little too big, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Aiden sat on her other side, clutching a small toy car, his thumb pressed firmly in his mouth. He leaned into her without thinking, as if gravity itself pulled him toward his sister. Alexander watched them both. He had been in courtrooms before: corporate disputes, intellectual property battles, hostile takeovers. Those rooms buzzed with ego and money and noise. This one felt different. This one mattered. The judge entered. Everyone stood. When they sat again, the room felt smaller, heavier. The facts were presented calmly. Dates, addresses, statements. The death of the children's mother 2 months prior. The father's remarriage. The absence. The abandonment. No raised voices, no accusations shouted across the room, just truth spoken clearly. Richard Hale sat at the opposite table. He looked smaller than Alexander remembered, shoulders, rounded hands clenched together, as if holding himself upright required effort. Beside him sat Marla, the stepmother. She avoided looking at the children entirely. When asked why the children were no longer in the home, Richard's voice shook. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. I thought they'd manage for a little while." The judge paused. A 9-year-old and a 3-year-old Richard's silence was answer enough. Alexander's attorney spoke next. She described the abandoned house, the lack of heat, the consistent care Nayla provided for Aiden. She spoke of food hidden in jackets, of lullabies sung to drown out hunger. Nyla's fingers tightened. Alexander leaned closer. "You don't have to listen," he whispered. "I want to," Nyla replied. When Alexander was called to speak, he stood slowly. "I didn't go looking to change anyone's life," he said. "I stopped for dinner. I saw a child doing what no child should ever have to do. I followed not to accuse, but to understand." He looked at the judge. "What I found was responsibility where there should have been protection." The judge nodded once. Then came the question everyone had been avoiding. "What do the children want?" The room went still. Nyla looked up at Alexander, eyes searching. He didn't answer for her. He simply squeezed her hand and waited. Nyla stood slowly. The microphone was adjusted downward. Someone placed a small stool beneath her feet so she could reach it. The sound of it scraping lightly against the floor felt unbearably loud. She took a breath. Aiden whimpered softly, reaching for her sleeve. She knelt, pressed her forehead gently to his, and whispered something only he could hear. He nodded, still sucking his thumb, trusting without question. Then she stood again. "My name is Nayla," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm 9. The judge smiled gently. "You can take your time." Nyla nodded. "I take care of my brother. His name is Aiden. He's 3. She paused, eyes moving briefly to her father. He looked at her now, really looked, tears streaming freely down his face. Nayla didn't look away. "When Mom died," she continued, "everything got quiet. Dad was sad. I tried to help. I cleaned. I made sandwiches." She swallowed. "Then there was another woman. She didn't like noise. Aiden cries when he's hungry." A murmur moved through the room. Nyla pressed on. "We didn't get hit. We weren't yelled at. We were just not wanted." Alexander felt his chest tighten painfully. "So we left," Nayla said. "I knew places where people left food." The judge's pen stilled, and Alexander the judge asked gently, "What has he done for you?" Nayla turned toward him. "He didn't ask me to explain first," she said. "He didn't get mad. He didn't tell me what I did wrong." She took another breath. "He made sure Aiden ate. He made sure we were warm. He listened." Silence filled the room. The judge leaned forward. "What do you want, Nyla?" The question hung in the air, fragile as glass. Nyla thought for a long moment. Then she said very clearly, "I want my brother to be safe." The judge nodded. "And you?" Nyla hesitated. Alexander's heart stopped. "I want to stay where he's safe," she said at last. Richard broke down then quietly, shoulders shaking. Marla stared at the table, unmoving. The judge closed the file. "I've heard enough," she said. The ruling was measured, deliberate. Termination of custody. Legal responsibility transferred. Adoption approved pending final review. But Alexander barely heard the words, because Nyla had turned to him, eyes wide, searching. He nodded once. "Yes," he whispered. "You're home." Aiden clapped when everyone stood. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the shift. The relief. The way Nayla finally relaxed. Outside, snow fell softly. Not harsh. Not cruel. Just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like a beginning. The courthouse doors closed behind them with a soft, final sound. Not a slam. Not a victory echo. Just a quiet click that told Alexander one thing: this is real now. Outside, the cold met them immediately. Snow drifted in slow, patient flakes, turning the steps into a pale carpet. Nyla held Aiden's hand with the same grip she always used, tight enough to keep him close, gentle enough not to hurt. Alexander walked beside them, coat collar turned up, eyes scanning the street out of habit. For years, his life had been built on control security teams, schedules, systems designed to prevent surprises. but today had rewritten the meaning of security. Aiden looked up at the sky, mouth open in wonder, as a snowflake landed on his nose. He giggled, then tried to catch more with his tiny palm. Nyla watched him, half smiling, but her eyes kept flicking toward the courthouse windows, as if the ruling might change if she stopped paying attention. Alexander noticed. He slowed his pace so he could speak softly without making it a moment everyone could see. "You're allowed to look forward now," he told her. Nyla didn't answer right away. Then she said, almost inaudible, "I don't know how." Alexander swallowed. "Then we'll learn." The drive home was quiet. Aiden fell asleep before they reached the highway, his toy car still clutched in his fist. His head rested against Nyla's shoulder. For the first time, she didn't sit rigidly. She leaned her cheek lightly against his hair, eyes open, watching the lights blur past the window. Alexander kept both hands on the wheel, but his mind was somewhere else, standing in that courtroom, hearing a 9-year-old say she didn't feel wanted. He knew the word. He'd heard it in boardrooms: wanted shares, wanted leverage, wanted outcomes. He had never heard it from a child. When they arrived, the estate looked too bright against the winter night windows, glowing warmly in the snow. The guest house lights were on a soft welcome rather than a spotlight. Alexander had told the staff to keep distance. No crowd, no curious faces, no loud greetings. This wasn't a celebration. It was a landing. Inside, Nyla stepped onto the clean floor as if she expected it to disappear. She glanced toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where Aiden had slept the night before. Her body remained tense, ready to move if she had to. Alexander took off his gloves and crouched near Aiden's sleeping form. "I'll carry him," he whispered. Nyla's eyes widened slightly. "He wakes up sometimes. I'll be careful." Alexander lifted Aiden gently, surprised by how light he was. Aiden's head rolled against his shoulder, and Alexander instinctively steadied it with one hand, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Nyla followed closely, almost silent. In the bedroom, Alexander lowered Aiden onto the small bed and pulled the blanket up to his chin. Aiden sighed in his sleep, mouth relaxing, fingers unclenching slightly around the toy car. Nyla stood at the foot of the bed, watching as if witnessing something sacred. Alexander looked at her. "You can sleep too." Nyla's gaze didn't leave Aiden. "If I sleep, what if he needs me?" Alexander felt the familiar pressure behind his eyes, the one he refused to name as tears. "I'll be here," he said. "If he wakes up, I'll come get you, or I'll sit with him. Either way, you won't lose him." Nyla's shoulders trembled once. Not sobs, just the body letting go of something it had carried too long. Alexander stepped out and returned with something small, a new phone set up with only a few contacts. Alexander's number at the top, the lawyer, emergency services, nothing else. He placed it on the nightstand. "This is for you," he said. "If you ever feel scared, you call me, day or night." Nyla stared at it like it was a foreign object. "I've never had one," she admitted. "I know," Alexander replied softly. "That's why you do now." Later in the kitchen, Alexander warmed milk for Aiden because he'd heard Nyla mention once that it helped him sleep. He moved carefully, quietly, not wanting to overwhelm them with newness. Nyla sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa. The warmth pinked her cheeks, but her eyes remained guarded. Alexander placed a folder beside her. Nyla's gaze sharpened instantly. "What is that paperwork?" Alexander said. "It says you're safe here. It says you're mine to protect." Nyla's lips parted slightly. "Mine," Alexander nodded. "Family doesn't mean chains. It means choice. It means someone staying." She looked down at the folder, then back up. "Why would you choose us?" Alexander didn't answer with a speech. He answered with the truth that had been waiting beneath everything else. "Because I know what it feels like," he said, voice low, "to be small in a world that doesn't care." Nyla held his gaze for a long time. Then carefully, as if testing the ground beneath her feet, she asked, "Are we Allowed to laugh here, Alexander's throat tightened. Yes, he whispered, you're allowed. And that night, when Aiden woke briefly and called for his sister, Alexander was the one who went to the room first, not to replace Nayla, but to prove the promise. He sat on the edge of the bed, spoke softly, and waited until Aiden's eyelids drooped again. From the doorway, Nayla watched, silent, stunned. For the first time, she didn't rush forward like a soldier. She just stood there, a 9-year-old girl, finally seeing something she'd never dared imagine, a life where she wasn't alone on watch. Morning arrived quietly, like it was afraid to disturb them. Snow lay untouched outside the guest house windows, softening the world into pale silence. Inside, warmth held steady, no flickering lamp, no wind slipping through cracks. Just heat that stayed the kind Nayla had never trusted. She woke before the sun, out of habit, not comfort. For a few seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Her body tensed, ready to sit up, ready to listen for danger. Then she heard it, the low hum of the heater, the faint clink of a spoon somewhere in the main house, and Aiden's breathing deep and even. Still here. Still safe. Nayla slid out of bed and padded to Aiden's side. He was sprawled under the blanket, cheeks, warm hair sticking up at strange angles. His toy car rested near his hand like a tiny guard dog. Nayla smiled before she could stop herself. Then she froze, as if smiling was something she might get in trouble for. A knock came at the door. Not loud, not sudden. Respectful. Nayla Alexander's voice, calm and gentle. "Can I come in?" Nayla blinked. No one had ever asked her permission for anything. "Yes," she said, surprised by how small her voice sounded. Alexander stepped in, carrying a tray pancakes, fruit, warm milk for Aiden, cocoa for her. The smell hit the room like a memory she'd never had breakfast that wasn't stolen, begged for, or scraped together. "I wasn't sure what you like," Alexander admitted, "so I guessed." Nayla stared at the tray as if it might vanish. "Why did you bring it here? So you don't have to get up and work first," he said simply. "You're not on duty." The words didn't land all at once. They sank slowly like warm water into cold hands. Aiden woke as soon as he smelled food. He sat up, blinking sleep from his eyes, then grinned. "Pancakes," he announced as if he'd always had them. He reached out, then hesitated, looking to Nayla for approval. Nayla nodded. Aiden ate with both hands, messier than usual, syrup smearing the corner of his mouth. Nayla flinched. At first, mess had always meant scolding consequences. But no one scolded him. No one grabbed his wrist. Alexander only laughed softly and handed him a napkin. Nayla watched, that really watched it, like she was studying a magic trick. When Aiden finished, he slid off the bed and wandered toward the window. He pressed his palms to the glass and gasped at the snow. "Can we go outside?" he asked. Nyla's instinctive answer rose instantly. "No, it's dangerous. Stay close. Don't be seen." But Alexander answered first. "Yes," he said. "After you put on your boots. Boots. Real boots." Alexander opened a box on the chair and pulled out 2 pairs small winter boots for Aiden, slightly bigger ones for Nayla. New. Clean. Warm-lined. Nyla's throat tightened. "We can't pay for those." "You don't have to," Alexander said. "That's the point." Outside, Aiden waddled into the snow like it was a new planet. He laughed, stumbling, then started making tiny footprints in circles, delighted by the sound his boots made against the ice. Nayla stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, unsure how to enter a world where play was allowed. Alexander stepped beside her. "You can go," he said. Nayla shook her head. "What if he falls? I'll be right there," Alexander replied. "And so will you. But not because you have to, because you want to." Nayla watched Aiden bend down and scoop snow into his mittened hands. He lifted it like treasure. Something in her face softened. She stepped off the porch. One careful step, then another. Aiden turned, saw her coming, and squealed with joy. He ran toward her, arms out, snow spraying at his feet. Nyla knelt instinctively, catching him before he crashed into her, and for the first time her laughter broke free, small, startled, and real. Alexander stood back, letting the sound fill the cold morning. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to change everything. Winter loosened its grip slowly. Snow still lined the trees around Alexander's home, but the air felt lighter, as if the world had decided to give them space to breathe. The final papers arrived on a quiet afternoon, carried in a plain envelope that didn't look important enough to change 3 lives. But it did. Alexander stood at the kitchen table as he signed the last page, pen steady in his hand. No cameras, no lawyers crowding the room, just the sound of paper and the soft hum of the house. When he finished, he set the pen down and looked at Nyla. "It's official," he said. "You and Aiden are my family." Nyla didn't speak right away. She stood near the doorway, one hand resting on Aiden's shoulder. Aiden was busy lining up toy cars on the rug, completely unconcerned with paperwork and permanence. For him, the world was simple. He was warm-fed and not alone. For Nyla, it took longer. "Does this mean—" She began, then stopped. Alexander waited. "Does this mean we don't have to leave?" she asked finally. Alexander crossed the room and knelt in front of her so they were eye level. "It means you never have to run again." Her breath caught, not in a dramatic way, just a small, quiet sound like something fragile settling into place. That night, the house felt different. Dinner was louder. Aiden told a long, serious story about a snowman he planned to build tomorrow, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Alexander listened, as if it were the most important briefing he'd ever received. Nyla ate slowly, watching everything. The way Alexander laughed without checking the time. The way Aiden interrupted without being corrected. The way the world didn't collapse when things were messy. After dinner, Alexander handed Nyla a small box. "It's not big," he said, "and you don't have to open it now." Nyla opened it anyway. Inside was a simple silver pendant, smooth and warm to the touch. No engraving, no name, just a circle unbroken. "What is it?" she asked. "It's a reminder," Alexander said, "that you're not alone anymore. That if you ever feel scared, you belong somewhere." Nyla closed her fingers around it. Later, as night settled in, Aiden grew sleepy. His words slowed, his eyes fluttered. "Song," he murmured. Nyla stiffened instinctively. Singing had always meant keeping him calm, keeping him quiet, keeping them safe, Alexander noticed. "You don't have to," he said gently. Nyla hesitated. Then she nodded, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She sat on the edge of Aiden's bed and sang the same soft tune she had once used to drown out hunger in an abandoned house. But now her voice didn't shake. The room was warm. The light was steady. Alexander stood in the doorway listening. When Aiden fell asleep, Nyla stayed a moment longer, watching his chest rise and fall. Then she turned to Alexander. She hesitated just a second longer than necessary. "Alexander," she said. "Yes." Her voice was quiet but sure. "Thank you, Dad." The word landed gently. Not heavy, not forced, just true. Alexander felt his vision blur, but he didn't look away. He smiled, the kind of smile that comes from something finally fitting. "Good night, Nyla," he said. Outside, winter faded inch by inch. Inside, the song stayed. And it always would. Did this story move you? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss other heartwarming stories. Click on the last screen to see the next emotional chapter waiting for you. See you in the next story.